So today we are talking about FOMO and finances. Anybody know what FOMO means? Fear of missing out. Right. This is an actual thing. Showed up in dictionaries, semi-official dictionaries in 2004. If you read the book, they kind of dialed it back to that particular time. FOMO, which is related to FOMO, means fear of a better offer. And both of these things are related to each other. FOMO is you're fearing like you're missing out on something that's going on. And what if you're the only one that's missing out on that? Then that makes you a loser. And what does that mean about your self-esteem? And should you go on living? And all these things. Fear of a better offer means you've said yes to one thing, but then a better offer comes up and you feel like, what if there's a better offer out there right behind me? So, he gives an example in a book about a guy who kind of kept all of his options open to the last minute until he finally committed at the 11th hour, only to immediately following that, a better offer actually came along and he missed out on it. Confirming his fears, and he's still in therapy as far as we know. Well, these two things, FOMO and finances, fear of finances, financial peril, I think they're things that we all struggle with to varying degrees. And Hamilton's suggestion on how to deal with these things is actually very similar. But one of the things he mentions, especially on the fear of missing out, has to do with, I think, a very recent phenomenon that I think the fear of missing out is maybe greater today than it has been than before the last 10 years. Because over the last 10 years or so, Facebook and social media became a thing. And prior to that, you really didn't know what anybody else was doing. But with the dawn of Facebook and Snapchat and Instagram and Twitter and these things, everybody can let everybody know what they want to let everybody know about their life. And so I was thinking about that today because I'm kind of guilty of that. I don't post a lot. I either post stuff for the church, or if my family or Lynn and I are out doing something fun, I might post a picture of that. And so I have a friend, he's actually a pastor in Alameda. And every time I see him, he says, "Man, Pete, you just live a charmed life." And frankly, I do. I love my life. I'm very happy with my life. But the thing that he's gauging on my life being charmed is entirely on what he sees on Facebook. So as far as he knows, my world is just full of family outings to this cool spot, or that restaurant, or this experience, or that movie, or whatever. And he's like, "Gosh, I sure wish I had Pete's life." Now what he doesn't realize is that I don't post stuff like, "Oh yeah, I'm cleaning the house today," or "It's yard work day," or "My neighbor's limb fell down and I'm busting my chops to get that thing until taken care of," or "Oh man, I had a really tough conversation with so-and-so today. They were really struggling with this," or I'm kind of spent because I had like 10 of those conversations today. I never post that stuff. So Facebook is one of those spaces, at least for me, where I want to put the positive memories out there, partly because I know that every year on that same date, Facebook is going to show it to me. And I get to relive the memory, which is fun. And I get to look back and see what I've done over all those years on that particular day. And I like that. And I like that my friends and family, which span my entire life, because I have Facebook friends on there literally from preschool all the way up to the present, is they're sort of involved. And we can see each other. And I like that part of Facebook. But make no mistake, Facebook is what it is. And Facebook isn't the whole story. Facebook is the story that we want to tell. And so if we, because of social media, if we are thinking that we're missing out on something, just remember, you're probably not seeing the whole story. And there's probably a whole lot of stuff in those people's lives that you don't want anything to do with. So enjoy your own life. Which leads to one of his antidotes for fear of missing out and fear of financial stuff. On the financial stuff, just briefly, he says something really obvious that all of us know is true for our financial well-being as well as our waistline and our overall health. He says you got to watch what you're spending just like we watch what we're eating. He says if you go out of control with your spending, your fear of financial stuff is going to skyrocket. Just like if we don't pay any attention to what we eat, just eat whatever, that's going to come up and have adverse health issues on us as well. So that's kind of obvious, and we just have taken a group through. Is the group done, by the way? Where did Ann go?
Yes.
Is it totally done? Yeah. Well, I heard great things about this course that Ann just led a group through on Financial Peace University. Was it good? Anybody who showed up? All right, one person thought it was good. That's fantastic. Great. Anyway, we will be offering that again sometime in the future, and I'm sure it will be good. So do that kind of a thing. Get resources because there are resources. But the number one thing that I thought Hamilton gave us to take away on these two issues, fear of missing out and our financial stuff, had to do with gratitude, of being grateful for where you are and what you have. When our focus is on what we don't have or what we're not doing, envy starts to get in to that place. And envy and greed are two of the 7 deadly sins for a reason. They rob us of the joy that we have now. So when it comes to greed or wanting things or wanting experiences, when we focus on those things too much, the very thing that we have gets masked. And we aren't even appreciative of the good thing that we do have because we're thinking about that next better option or experience. We're thinking about that cooler gadget that we want to get, or the bigger house, or the better trip, or blah, blah, blah. And so he recommends a couple things. First, he does something which I need to improve on just because it's such an obvious, easy thing, and that is at meals. Most of you eat, and most of you do it at the same time about every day. And if you're old-fashioned, you have 3 meals a day. And if you're trying different diet fads, you might be eating 6 times a day. His recommendation is take pause before you eat and be grateful that you have something to eat. It's so simple. We take it so for granted. We are so spoiled in the United States. 10x spoiled in Napa Valley because we have so much luxurious, incredible food at our fingertips that we forget that we get to eat. That's one of the most compelling things that we bring back to you every time we visit Faraha, and our passion is reignited. That those kids, that is not lost on, and they realize they get to eat every school day. So take pause every day, every meal of the day, and just be grateful that you get to eat, because that's a big deal. And literally, the majority of the people in the world do not have that luxury. So don't whine about what you're eating. Watch yourself on that. Be grateful for what you got. So the other thing is related to that. And that has to do with something good old Oprah had something to say about, which was keeping a gratitude journal, or keeping track of your gratitude. You may exercise this literally with a journal. You might do this at the start of your day and at the end of the day. But start your day off and end your day with gratitude. Start your day off with just being grateful that you got another day. That's a gift from God, to capitalize on the life that you have. And at the end of your day, review the day and be grateful for the events of the day, the people that are in your day, the fact you had another day, the fact that you're probably going to sleep in a bed that night, the simple things that we take for granted. I'm confident that if we just do these practices, it's going to help a lot. So that's super practical stuff that you brought. But there's something else, especially on this July 4th week, that I want to talk about. As I was praying about, well, what do we want to do? Because these 2 chapters are so practical and somewhat obvious, that I thought, man, there's just got to be a little bit more here. And so the more came late in the game for me. And I was thinking about, what does it mean, especially in our divided times in our country? What does it mean to be Jesus followers in this country? And how do we work that out? And so there's a story, actually it's a great book in the Bible called Daniel. And I'm going to highlight just a few things from the first half of this book. And my homework assignment for you, because it's actually really interesting reading, is to read the first 6 chapters of the Old Testament prophet book, Daniel. The last 6 chapters gets into prophecy stuff, which will probably just be confusing. It's interesting, but probably just confusing. So stick to the first 6 chapters. And it goes over these things on the next thing. So Daniel, just so you understand, we're going to talk about Daniel's citizenship and how that was impacted by diets, dreams, idols, decimation, writing on the wall, and the lion's den. But Daniel was a guy who was not in his own country. He was one of the best and brightest of ancient Israel, and then the Babylonians came in and wiped out ancient Israel. And they took the best and brightest that Israel had, and they took them back to Babylon, trained them under their own regime, so that they would be government leaders and officials, sort of this multinational strategy of making sure they had a global understanding of things and also won allegiance from some key Israelites in the process. So Daniel and three guys' names whose names were Babylonized, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, we'll talk about those guys. These four were some of the best and brightest that Israel had to offer, and they found themselves in boot camp in Babylon. One of the first things that they had to think through had to do with what they ate. These guys were deeply devout Jews with fairly strict discipline when it came to what they ate. Well, the king wanted to offer their first class of students, these sharp people from probably all over the world, their ancient world anyway, and so they wanted to really do it up right. And so they were doing it up in Carl's Jr. style, 3 times a day. Don't you love and hate Carl's Jr.? I mean, I don't eat their burgers a lot, but man, their commercials. Wow. I'm never really thinking about burgers until I see their latest creation. I mean, and creative, man. I mean, who is working in their kitchen? I think the latest one, let's think through this. They've got, okay, so they start off with this enriched white flour bun with tons of butter in it. So we're starting off with 250 calories, and we haven't even gotten to anything yet. Worthless calories, too. And then we get the burger, which I'm sure is the finest beef that money can afford. So, 50% fat or whatever. And it's huge, and lots of grease on there to give us some good taste. And then they throw some cheese on there just for some good measure. And then I think, what's the latest thing they got on there? They've got some onion rings on top of that. Bacon somehow in there, probably some mushrooms in there, probably some chicken wings in there. Hard to tell exactly. And the burger somehow stands this tall, and for $5 it can be yours, right? Oh, the pulled pork, yeah, that's all in there too. With the bacon, because bacon was insensitive to the full body parts of the pig, right? So you see this thing. Well, anyway, these guys in Babylon, they were being treated to this kind of meal every day, and they were talking amongst each other, and Daniel, just talked to the guys, and they kind of decided, hey, we can't eat like this. And so they talked to the steward, and the wine to boot, so everything was flowing, and said to the steward, said, man, no offense, but we can't eat this stuff. This will kill us. Literally, it'll kill us. And the guy wasn't too sure about that. He said, I don't know. The king usually doesn't like this. He's trying to impress you and lay it all out for you and win you to the way and all that. And so Daniel made a deal with him. He said, all right, let's just try this. 10 days. You feed us just vegetables and water. Just vegetables and water. And just compare us in 10 days. See who looks healthier, who's stronger, fitter, etc. He says, all right, we'll give it a shot. And after 10 days, lo and behold, the comparison between these vegetarians only drinking water and the Carl's Jr. camp, there was no contest. The Israelites were healthier. So what does that mean? It means we need to throw away all those burgers today. And God bless America. We're not going to do that to you today. No worries. So the diet was the first thing. But, it goes beyond this in terms of being a good citizen as a Jesus follower. Because Daniel was trying to be a God follower in a very Jewish way. Jesus was a Jewish man trying to be a God follower in a very Jewish way. And so seriously, as we think through the fact that we are a capitalistic country, which means that we believe in private enterprise for goods and services and making business happen that way, and we are a country that is built on consumerism, which means that you are always going to not be satisfied with what you have because the good business people are always going to tempt you with the next better thing, meaning burgers are always going to be on TV, always wooing us to get that next 2,000 calorie special. How are you going to interact in this culture? And not just with food, but with everything. What are you taking in? And that's not just for food, but it's for consumeristic things like your stuff, your gadgets. And not just for your stuff and your gadgets, but how about the information that you take in? How many of you have fasted or significantly reduced the amount of news that you watch over the last year or two? Uh-huh. Good. Good. Because we also understand that there is the same flavor of consumerism even in the news that we watch. Meaning that some things have to be inflated to keep our attention. And that heightens our anxiety. What are you taking in? And what things do you have to cut back because you're a Jesus follower, which will help you become a better citizen? Think about dreams. So a kooky thing that happened is King Nebuchadnezzar, who was running the show in Babylon, he had lots of different mediums and prophets and all sorts of manner of religious leaders helping him in his country. And he had this dream which would not let him go, and it was driving him crazy. But he didn't trust them. It's kind of like, going to get your palm read or something like that. And some of these things, you might get there and you're about 5 minutes in, you might feel like you've been had. Like, they're just kind of fishing for any kind of hook to get you on to think that maybe they're onto something here. And King Nebuchadnezzar knew that if he shared his dream, then he would get all kinds of feedback about what it must mean. So he went this way with it. He said to all of his religious people, I have this terrible dream I want you to interpret, but I'm not going to tell you what the dream is. You first have to tell me what the dream is, and then you have to interpret it. And everybody was saying, that's impossible. How are we supposed to do that? And it made him so mad that he ordered that all of his religious leaders be killed. Well, Daniel got wind of this. Daniel did not want to be killed. And so he begged for just a little bit of time so he could pray and discern. And he went off. He took time. He took time to pray, to be still, and to discern and to listen. Lo and behold, God gave him both answers. What the dream was and what the interpretation of that dream was as well. And he went back to King Nebuchadnezzar and he laid it out. And Nebuchadnezzar immediately knew, you are clearly following the God of all creation. Nebuchadnezzar actually sings a praise song to God at that point in the scriptures. Really interesting. So I'm wondering, with the big decisions that we have in our country and our culture, which is so busy, this is kind of stuff we talk about, but do you take the time to dial in and be still and listen for God? Is there a part of your day, is there a rhythm in your life that you have purposely built into? That you have a disciplined moment where you have time and space to be still, to be quiet. And when I mean still and quiet, I mean still and quiet. I don't mean just plowing through a chapter of Scripture and feeling like you've been still and quiet. Scripture's awesome. But that's still something coming into your head. God can speak through Scripture, but I'm asking you if it is possible for you to be still. Some of you think, yeah, I can be still for about 30 seconds. And I'm encouraging you to build on that. Because when you can incorporate stillness, peace, quiet into your day, you will experience more of the breath of God in your life. I'm confident of that. And if you don't, I'm pretty sure you won't. So start slow, get the Headspace app, whatever it takes, to learn how to do this stuff, because it matters. It will make you a more reasonable, balanced, centered person of God, which is going to make you a better citizen. Why do I say better citizen? That's actually Paul's language. He says, you know what, if you follow God well, if you do the things that Jesus did, there's no law against that. And you're only going to bless the country that you live in. Idols, this is the next weird thing that happened. Really weird. So King Nebuchadnezzar, being a pluralist and wanting to honor all kinds of different expressions of faith, built a 90-foot statue, 90 feet, You know the outlet mall sign over there? That's about half that. 90 feet is twice that. The reason I know that is because Napa has an ordinance. You can't go above 40 feet. So twice that height, he makes this massive statue and demands everybody to bow down and worship to it. Daniel's friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that's their Babylon names, they refused because they understood from their Jewish sensibilities that that would be an act of worship and we're not going to do that. So they refused to do it. Word got up to the king and he was furious. I spent all this money and time to build this thing. You don't do it, you're dead. And the guys still refused. And so Nebuchadnezzar ordered up the crematorium, hotter than it ever would be. He had the 3 guys bound and gagged, had servants throw them into this furnace. The servants who threw these guys into the furnace died from exposure to that heat. And so Nebuchadnezzar watched to see these guys turn to ash. And all of a sudden, these 3 inside this furnace became 4. And nobody burned. And he called in there, "What are you doing?" And had some kind of weird conversation. Before you knew it, the 3 guys come out, their clothing unharmed, their hair on their head, completely untouched by the flame. The guys who went in there, their attitude toward their whole experience with Nebuchadnezzar was simply this: we would rather die than not be faithful to our God, even if it means standing up to Nebuchadnezzar. Because if we died having worshipped this other God, that would send the wrong message to our God, to what we believe about everything. They'd rather die. This raises a very challenging question to us who love our country. Which allegiance for you is first? This country or Jesus? The United States of America or the way of Christ? Because there is a rub. And at times, the people of Jesus have to say, as Jesus people, we see that, and that is wrong. We see this, and that is inhumane. Even if it challenges our country. Because we recognize that even though in God we trust is on our currency, and we hear lots of God talk in our political spectrum, we remember that as much as we want to say that our nation is Christian, our nation is first and most capitalist and consumer. And those 2 things, especially the latter, is going to put Christianity at odds with it again and again. Because Christianity is saying, well, let's be generous. Let's be measured. Let's be careful and wise. Consumerism and capitalism are saying, you need more, and more for you and you. You need to hoard it for yourself to make sure that somebody else, that you have enough just in case. Which one are you most allegiant to? Tough question. If you don't ask the question, you might be surprised where it takes you. The next thing has to do with being decimated. So, this is another dream that shows up with Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar has this weird dream about a tree that was beautiful on top and spreading out and very healthy, but then suddenly becomes this stump and dew on the stump. It's kind of this weird, I ate bad mushrooms or something the night before kind of a dream, right? And asks for Daniel to help. Daniel comes and gives him this statement. It's interesting how Daniel plays it with the king. He says to Nebuchadnezzar, he says, "Oh man, I'm really sorry, but this dream is about you. It speaks of how you had everything going for you, and you were so healthy and wise, and your reach was beyond measure. But what it's saying is that that's all going to be taken away from you for 7 seasons. And for 7 seasons, you're going to lose your mind. I don't know if it's a breakdown or what, but you're not going to be you. And you're going to be living out in nature like a wild animal. You're going to be eating what they eat. I mean, just whatever that picture is." And it came to pass. But the hopefulness in it was that it was for 7 seasons and not forever. The interesting thing for Nebuchadnezzar, first of all, the first thing I saw here is for Daniel, the way he presented it to the king was with compassion. He didn't say, well, it's about time you get yours, big jerk. This is what's coming down the pike. Here we go. He didn't say it like that at all. He said it with compassion and mercy and even hope, because he said it's only going to last for 7 seasons, and then it's going to be all right. That's beautiful. So Nebuchadnezzar, hearing this, nobody wants to hear you're going to go through a 7-year period where it's going to be literal hell. You're not going to be who you are. You're going to be homeless. You're going to have to figure out everything, and you got some mental illness happening, and you're not going to be able to live normally. It's going to be bad. But then it's going to pass. Nebuchadnezzar went through the 7 years. And when he came back and saw that he was restored and well again, guess what he did? He sang another worship song. Because Daniel told him, my God has told me that this is going to happen. And it happened. And Nebuchadnezzar was humbled. And he had a different frame of reference. So we learned something from Nebuchadnezzar too, don't we? About how do we integrate pain and suffering into our lives. And the big lesson of this is, it's going to be okay. The first and last piece that Hamilton talks about and his approach to dealing with fear is, first of all, to face fears with faith. Somehow God is in motion here. We're not alone in this. And the final thing he said is, he rests in the fact that somehow things are going to work out. That God is somehow in motion here, and we can just have this deep, abiding trust that it's going to be all right. We can rest in that. Well, we learned from the king on that. This gets us to the writing on the wall. Something that we don't like to talk about, especially in politics. So this is a different king now. This is I can't remember if it's a son or grandson of Nebuchadnezzar. And he's in charge. Nebuchadnezzar is dead, and he's having a big feast for all of his most important people. And they're having the finest wine that they have, and they decide to show off a little bit. So they go into their treasury, and they pull out these chalices made of pure gold that were crafted for the temple in Jerusalem. So these are sacred objects. And they're having a party with all this stuff. And as they are partying, a weird thing happens. This dismembered hand shows up in their banquet hall and starts writing on the wall. That's where the phrase comes, the writing's on the wall. And nobody knows what it's writing. They can't make it out. And so they call the best scholars, their best religious people, figure out what this means. And the king everybody's freaking out. I mean, honestly, we've all been there, right, where we see a handwriting on the wall. But not for them. So anyway, he's freaking out. Somebody whispers in his ear, hey, there's this old dude named Daniel. And he seems to have had some luck with this stuff in the past. We think you got to bring him in. So they brought Daniel in, and he takes a look at it. The king says to him, look, man, I've heard good things about you. If you're willing to do this and you can solve this riddle, I will make you rich beyond your dreams. I'll give you gold. I'll put the finest robe on you. You are going to be set even more than you're set. And Daniel's response to him was, keep your money. I don't need your money. I don't want to be a part of your money. But I'll tell you what it says. And he decoded it. The writing on the wall for that king was simple. It was, your days are numbered. You have been found wanting. And you're toast. Good news. Well, the king was good to his word and loaded up Daniel with all of his stuff. I don't know what Daniel did with that. And Daniel went away. That very night, that king was killed. New king came into power. Recognizing that Daniel was about the smartest guy around the table, he put Daniel in charge, along with a handful of others, of their leadership for their global domination. But Daniel, being a guy who understood his diet, took the time to think and be quiet and still, was aware of who he chose to be with first, was not shaken by the fear of things falling apart, and recognizing that God was in motion all around him, he did better than every other leader. And everybody in his team under his charge, they outdid the other teams by far. So they reorganized. And he became third in charge of all of Babylon. That's a pretty big deal. Well, the other religious folks in particular, and the other leaders, were very jealous of Daniel. They couldn't stand the guy. They tried to figure out every way to get something to stick on him. But unlike so often is the case with political leaders, who have a lot of stuff to stick on them, Daniel had nothing. They found no skeletons in his closet. He was just an upstanding dude who walked humbly with God. But then they remembered how devout he was. So they came up with a scheme. They went to the king, and they said, "King, we think we need to have a solid day, solid period of time where everybody worships you and you alone. Just a day honoring you," which was the case back in antiquity. Today it would seem ridiculous in our country especially. But back in the day when they thought that, the kings actually were part deity, that's how they became kings, it kind of made sense to worship the king. Caesar liked to be worshipped, for instance, so that's not uncommon. And so the king wrote an edict, put it into law. You shall worship me on this particular day. This was the trap, because they knew that there was no way that Daniel would do it. And they were right. Daniel refused to worship because he knew where his first allegiance was. The king did not want anything to happen to his beloved Daniel. But he had no choice. He had to do something because he wrote the law. He couldn't break the law that he just put into stone. And so he made the call he did not want to make. And he had Daniel thrown into a lion's den. It wrecked him, the king. The king was wringing his hands all through the night because he couldn't imagine the terror that Daniel was going through. The very next morning, Daniel comes out untouched. Untouched. And said, "God was with me. I had nothing to fear. Here I am." That infuriated the king, by the way. Not that he was okay, but that he was set up on this thing. And so all those guys who set him up, he threw those guys and their families into that same lion's den. And before, Carrie's wincing here, but she's secretly enjoying the story. And so as they are thrown into the lion's den, the lions attack these people and have their feast. But Daniel, even as he went into that lion's den, had peace and calm. Isn't that what you want? Because the lion's den's coming. Even if you're first and foremost following Jesus, that is going to take us to a rub somewhere along the way. And it may not be a literal lion's den, but it may be stressful, may be challenging. And I'm wondering, wouldn't it be great to know going into the challenge that it's going to be all right? Because you know God is with you. Even if it means your demise, it's going to be all right. Because God is going to carry you. Some of you are dealing with health stuff right now. Or loved ones with health stuff. And you're trembling in your boots. It's going to be all right. Even if it's not all right in terms of physical health in this life now. But it's going to be all right. Because the God who's given us life and breath is bigger than this life, bigger than this breath. It's going to be all right. For some of you facing a horrible work situation or financial peril or whatever, it may suck for a while. It's going to be all right. Some of you may be going through serious pain because of relationship problems or whatever. And you've never felt that kind of agony before. You can barely fall asleep and then you can barely wake up and your heart aches because of the pain you go through. I just want to tell you, it's going to be all right. It's going to be all right. And I'm not talking in some kind of unicorn world where, magic happens and that. I'm saying that the God who is our ground-up being, who we fail to see all around us all the time because we don't take the time, we don't have eyes to see, is truly with us more than we can ask or imagine. And as we put our trust and our hope in that one who is with us, we know at the end of the day, it's going to be all right. And every day between now and then, we are not alone. That gives us great strength and hope. So on this week, where we celebrate our country, some of those people who are in the early venture into this experiment in the new land came because of religious freedom. They wanted a place where they could worship in their own way. And we still are among those people, worshiping in our way, in a land that we are free to do so. My question in light of Daniel and what he did in his land is, how are you exercising your allegiance to Jesus and the faith in a country that gives you full freedom to do just that? How are you living the life that Jesus has offered, which is good, abundant, speaks into the culture in good ways? Are you fully taking advantage of your freedom to do that? Because I think if you do, you will be a part of the answer to that prayer. God bless America. Let's pray together. So God, as we are in this sanctuary today, we use that word, God, specifically because it is so big of you. That you're bigger than we can possibly imagine. Your thoughts are higher than our thoughts. Your ways are deeper than our ways. Your grace is bigger than our grace. We attach labels to you, but you are infinitely bigger than our brains can fathom, which is what gives us hope. Because even though you are bigger, you are yet intimate and personal. You come alongside, you dwell within, you call us to something more than our flag can offer, something more than our military can offer, something deeper than our Pledge of Allegiance can offer. As much as we love our country, God, you are bigger than our country. And you are calling us to be your followers in this country, which does offer hope to the world. So help us, God, in our own ways. Figure out what it means to follow you well, that we might be the answer of prayer to bless this nation, that it might become more and more of who you would want it to be. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.